I have never understood husbands who for many years cannot understand that their wives are cheating on them. Because if you look from the outside, the signs were visible even before the official marriage. But my opinion changed dramatically when I myself found myself in the place of such men. How I didn't realize it before. Do you think this is a story about a woman of easy virtue? Helena Bonham asked as a group of Perryman financial executives sat in a bar at Logan International Airport in Boston, waiting out a snowfall delay. How about this? I know a woman who was so devious that she used to fly to Norway once a year for annual company meetings and spend most of the week in bed with the CEO's son. She did this for about 20 years, and her husband never suspected a thing. In the office, she was prim and proper. And for 51 weeks of the year, you'd think she was the nicest, most conservative, quiet woman you'd ever met. But during those corporate meetings in Norway, she turned into a completely different person. She thought none of us knew what was going on, but come on, when you leave the hotel every night with the same guy and don't sneak back until it's time to shower and change for the next day's meetings. Nobody's that oblivious, well, except maybe her husband. But you really can't blame him. Why would he think his practically goody two-shoes wife would be cheating on him for 1 week a year? I worked with her for about 15 years. I left about 2 years ago. I wonder if she's still up to the same tricks. What was her name? Tracy. Tracy Shondell. Yeah, that's it. I bet that poor guy's going to go to his grave never knowing his wife was deceiving him. Hey, wait a minute. We got a guy in our group named Shondell, Claude Weissenhunt whispered to me. You don't think she's talking about Shondy's wife, do you, Herb? You've met her. She kind of comes off like an ice queen, but she is one hot MILF. That's the story, Brian, as best as I remember it, Herb Mangold said to me over the phone. They went on to talk about someone else hooking up after that, but I knew I had to call you as soon as I heard it. I hope it's not your Tracy, Brian. Jesus, I really do, but if it were my wife, I'd want to know. Thanks, Herb. Really, I mean it. I hope it's not her, too, I said to my coworker. Hey, could you do me a favor and not mention this to anyone else? If Claude brings it up again, just shut it down as quietly as you can, and I'll tell Claude myself if I have to. But only if I have to. I've worked with Herb for 15 years at Perryman, and I'd trust the man with my children's lives. So I knew he could keep this quiet. I also trusted that he got the story straight, which means I had a world-flipping problem. My wife, Tracy, works in management at Johansen Lintid, a financial services firm based in Norway. For the past 23 years, she has been flying to Norway for a week of corporate meetings as part of the management team. Tracy is conservative, prim, and proper. And yes, she's also an attractive woman. But my Tracy would never cheat on me. Could never cheat on me. Could she? Helena Bonham's words echoed in my mind. I bet that poor bastard's going to go to his grave never knowing that his wife was cuckolding him. Sitting around in denial wasn't an option. This poor bastard was going to find out the truth. Tracy and I have been married for 25 years. We met in college and dated for 3 years before getting married. Both of us work in the financial services industry and have achieved considerable success in our careers. We have 3 wonderful children. One has graduated from college, one is a college junior, and the youngest is a college freshman. This year, we became empty nesters. Although it took some adjustment, being alone together again has rekindled our already strong marriage. Or so I thought until a few minutes ago. I sat at my office desk, pondering the situation. I honestly didn't know where to start. Tracy started working at Johansen right after graduating from college, about a year before we got married. It took her 3 years to earn a spot at the corporate meetings in Norway, and she's been attending every year since. She usually doesn't have much to say about these trips before or after. They just seem like a necessary evil. Looking back, she did seem a bit uneasy about going while pregnant with our first child, but I assumed it was because she was 5 months along and starting to feel uncomfortable. Now, of course, I wonder if she was uneasy, because she was pregnant while seeing her lover. I went to my Firefox bookmarks and clicked on Johansson's website. It was a beautiful, fast-loading site, fitting for one of the world's top financial firms. Since it was Tracy's company, I would occasionally browse it. But until today, the only corporate officer I knew about was the CEO, Gunnar Marquist. Marquist had brought 3 of his family members into the company, 2 sons and a daughter, and I found their photos and biographies on the website along with several other top officers. I read the kids' bios in chronological order, so I didn't get to Henrik Marquist's until last. When I opened his bio and saw a photo larger than a postage stamp, I almost lost my lunch. I was staring at the faces of my 2 youngest children, Jason and Marilyn. Holy shit. Tracy is of Norwegian descent herself, with long blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes, so I never thought twice about the last 2 kids being blonde and blue-eyed. Just like I never questioned it when Amy was born with brown hair and eyes like mine. But after seeing Henrik Marquist's photo, it was clear those kids couldn't be mine. I quickly did the math, too. The corporate meet is usually in August, and both of their birthdays are in May. Damn it. I desperately needed to talk to someone, but who could I really trust with a secret this delicate, and who would have the strength of character to give me good advice? Besides Tracy, my go-to person in situations like this was my father-in-law, Alf Schlagel. He had been my closest trusted advisor since my dad died when I was in my late 20s. Alf was a solid guy, never imposed himself, and because of this, he became my life consigliere during the few times I needed to talk to someone other than my wife. But I couldn't go to Alf. How do you tell a man, well, I'm sorry, sir, but I think your daughter is a cheater and has been sleeping with someone behind my back for over 20 years? It quickly became clear to me that I didn't have many close personal friends when I assessed my situation. My next closest confidant was my favorite bartender, the night manager at a small bar near my house called simply My Place. It was an old-fashioned pub that I occasionally visited for a quick drink or 2 in the evenings, or took Tracy with me for a quick dinner on other nights. Over the years, I had become somewhat close friends with January Don't Ever Call Me Jan Sparnacle, the feisty but level-headed daughter of the owner. She was a few years younger than me, but had been working at the pub her entire working life, and as such, had developed a real knack for understanding people. She had given me her thoughts and advice on a number of subjects over the years, but never anything of this magnitude. I hoped she was up to the challenge, though I wasn't sure I was. I took a couple of personal hours off work and headed over to my place. I arrived about an hour before January's shift started. I sat at the bar chatting with her father, Slats O'Corin, while I downed a couple of JDs over ice. Since I rarely visited the bar this early, I hadn't spoken to Slats in a while because he usually headed home as soon as his shift ended. That's how you stay married to the same woman for 50 years, he would often brag. How's that pretty wife of yours, Brian? Slats inquired. Lost in my own thoughts, I must have missed the question. Slats repeated it louder, being only a few feet away from me. This time I heard it, and I think most of the bar patrons did too. I stumbled, genuinely not knowing how to answer a simple question. She's fine, Dad. Look at you. He answered for me by coming up from behind on the left and having just entered through the service entrance. Hi, baby. How are you? I asked, wrapping her in a friendly bear hug. She hugged me back tightly and whispered in my ear, I'm fine. But I feel like there's something wrong with Brianland, don't you? I pulled away from the embrace with a shocked look. How could she know? I thought. Seeing the expression on my face, January sat down on a stool next to me and asked quietly, It's Tracy, isn't it? What's going on, Shandi? I haven't confirmed anything yet, and it will take some time. But a very reliable source has informed me that she has been cheating on me for over 20 years. What? How could you not know that this has been happening all these years? She asked in shock. Because she only does it once a week a year when she goes to Norway for her company's corporate meetings. Apparently, she's been sleeping with the boss's son for the last 25 years, 1 week a year. Ooh, she replied. Exactly, I said. Well, you can't just do nothing. Unless you're one of those kind of people who likes it when his wife cheats on him, she said matter-of-factly, waiting for a reaction. I shot her an angry look that should have conveyed everything, but she kept talking. The weak-willed would suggest you consider whether you'd be better off with or without her. But that's not how it works in reality, Bry, she began. If you're the man I believe you are, there's no way you can stay with a cheating woman who breaks her vows. Even if you were unaware of it for a long time and it only happens 1 week a year while she's abroad. I don't think you could live with yourself if you gave her this kind of free pass. And that's the issue. You might have loved her more than anything. Maybe you still do. But what kind of life will you have if you throw away your self-respect? Wrong is still wrong. And then there's the fact that the younger 2 kids might be his as well, I interrupted. January looked as if she had been punched in the gut. She looked exactly how I felt when Herb told me what he had heard. I continued while she sat there in shock. That's not confirmed yet, I said. I was thinking of giving all 3 kids ancestry DNA kits for Christmas, and I'd know in about 2 months. No, that's not the right approach, she responded. If you do that, everyone will find out, and then you've probably ruined any chance for revenge. The R word. That's why I turned to January. Like me, she wouldn't take this lying down. I didn't need a marriage counselor. I needed someone who would consider my side of things. You have to keep this completely under wraps until you're ready to take action. But if what you're telling me is true, you might still lose those kids. And I know that would break your heart. So, whatever you do, and I'm not sure there's much you can do, has to be tempered by your desire to stay their father. She quickly changed the subject. How about you bring everyone here for a quick meal over Christmas break? I'll personally serve drinks to everyone, and I'll make sure to collect the old glasses and seal them up. Then you can take the containers to a DNA testing lab I know. We'll get DNA from all 5 of you, which is more accurate in the long run. And at least I get a meal out of your sorry ass. She smiled broadly as she made her point, but something had to lighten the mood. Plus, she had given me sound advice. This was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. What are you going to do with intimacy? She asked next, quickly changing the subject again. Did she ask me what I thought she was asking? No, because she immediately flashed a devilish smile and said, I don't even think you got it right, you idiot. I'm not asking if you want to engage in intimacy. I'm asking what you're going to do about Tracy wanting to make love as usual. You can't just stop, because then she'll realize something's wrong. Damn, you're good at it. I hope that for Roy's sake he will never mistreat you, I replied, referring to her husband, with whom we have been together for about 25 years. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea. I guess to keep up appearances, I'll just have to keep doing it with her 3 times a week. Let me repeat it, asshole, she said flatly. You have to do everything you normally do with her, until you're ready to act. She's not stupid. In fact, she's been able to fool you for over 20 years. In other words, you're saying that right now I need to leave my guns and take cannoli. That's exactly it. By the way, a good reference to The Godfather. Be calm. Do not rush. Of course, it was easier said than done. You can't just stop loving someone overnight, no matter how much they hurt you. But this betrayal burned like hydrogen peroxide on an open wound. I suppose I seemed a bit more subdued during the Christmas season than usual, and both of Tracy's parents noticed. Thankfully, instead of approaching Tracy for clarification, they came directly to me due to our strong relationship. They inquired if something was troubling me, or if I was unwell. It pained me to deceive them. I'll miss Alf and Barb once Tracy and I go through with our divorce. I even contemplate if I could retain custody of them. It was melancholic realizing that this would be our final Christmas together as a family. Watching the pranks of the children, I was reminded of the time when they were younger, before I found out that two of them were biologically not mine. Even then, I considered myself incredibly fortunate to have such an intelligent and beautiful wife. I pondered whether Tracy would turn to Marquist after the divorce was finalized. I was aware he was married, but I wondered if he would leave his wife for my ex-wife, or if she would become his full-time mistress. What would my children do when they discovered the truth? Would I still be their dad, or just dad? There were countless questions plaguing my mind, yet so few answers. 3 weeks post-Christmas, I received my DNA results confirming what I already suspected. Amy was indeed the offspring of both Tracy and myself, while Jason and Marilyn were Tracy's children, sired by an unnamed individual I presume to be Henrik Marquist. On the Thursday following the DNA revelation, Tracy had a night out with her friends, providing me with an opportunity to meet with January at my place. I handed her the results for her perusal, and she reciprocated by furnishing me with a dossier of divorce attorneys she had researched. "You won't be taken advantage of in court during the divorce," January reassured me. "Your children are nearly independent. Your home is community property subject to a 50-50 split. Your primary concern should be how you want to retaliate. Just be careful not to alienate your kids in the process." Taking all this into consideration, financial revenge seemed the most feasible option. Initially, I needed to initiate divorce proceedings. Subsequently, I planned to sue Johansson for failing to uphold its moral obligations, leading to my divorce. Then, I intended to pursue Marquis for child support once my younger children discovered his paternity, ensuring he paid dearly. Not that I intended to pocket the money. I intended to divide the settlement equally among my children and establish a trust fund for them. I reached out to one of the attorneys recommended by January to kickstart the process. A few months later, I nearly disrupted everything. As our 26th anniversary approached on March 23rd, I treated the entire family and Tracy's parents to a lavish dinner at Pasqualone's, one of the finest restaurants in town. While we were preparing to leave, I observed Tracy adding jewelry to her ensemble and noticed a small velour bag nestled in the bottom layer of her jewelry box. Over the years, I've gifted Tracy numerous pieces of jewelry, but I couldn't recall any being in a velour bag. Out of curiosity, I reached for the bag and discovered 2 exquisite gold bracelets adorned with several turquoise charms. As someone with a keen eye for finances, I could tell that one bracelet had 12 charms, while the other had 11. "Wow. When did you acquire these?" I blurted out before fully processing my question. Tracy glanced over, her cheeks flushing crimson, and hastily retrieved the bracelets from my grasp. "These old things?" she stammered. "Oh, just some trinkets I picked up in Norway ages ago." Avoiding eye contact, she swiftly returned the bracelets to the bag and placed it back in the jewelry box. It dawned on me then. Those were likely gifts from Marquist, with a charm added each year to commemorate their time together. She probably takes them to Norway and wears them for him. That revelation seemed to unsettle Tracy for the rest of the evening. I could tell Alf and Marge noticed, and I think our 3 children picked up on the tension in the air. Tracy had her trip to Norway scheduled from August 14th to 21st. Despite her usual composed demeanor in hindsight, I couldn't help but admire her acting skills. She displayed no signs of anticipation or excitement in the weeks leading up to the trip. Had I not known about the truth regarding the children, I might have suspected the entire story to be fabricated. She even gave me our customary farewell kiss before departing for the airport in the company limousine on Sunday morning. My own flight to Oslo was scheduled later that day. I had arranged a full week of vacation without informing Tracy, my children, or my in-laws. Some experiences, I reasoned with January when making the plans, simply had to be witnessed firsthand. Arriving late Sunday night, I picked up my rental car and made my way to the hotel, conveniently located a few blocks from where Johansson was hosting their corporate meetings and where the out-of-town Johansson attendees were staying. Monday afternoon, I took some time to explore the city. Oslo was undeniably picturesque. According to the itinerary Tracy had shared with me, the meetings were scheduled to conclude at 4 p.m. each day, followed by dinner with local Johansson representatives at 6 p.m. However, Americans had the option to opt out and explore the city and its dining options on their own. The meetings were slated to wrap up by noon on Friday, allowing the American attendees roughly a day and a half to tour the city at their leisure. Around 4 o'clock, I positioned myself near the hotel, anticipating that Tracy would take some time to change into casual attire. Sporting sunglasses and a false beard, I doubted she'd recognize me, especially since I was the last person she'd expect to see in Norway. When she emerged from the hotel, she wore a stylish yet slightly shorter black dress I'd never seen her in before. The neckline plunged to reveal a glimpse of her 36D bust, and she looked stunning. Her feet were adorned with 3-inch black heels, and I noticed bracelets on each wrist adorned with charms I recalled seeing months earlier in her jewelry box, dismissed as old trinkets. But I wasn't fooled. Those old trinkets were likely worth around $5,000 each. She entered the company limousine. I couldn't tell if the jerk was already inside, but when they arrived at the restaurant, he exited the limo first, assisting her afterward. She leaned in, sharing a passionate kiss with him before they entered. I sat, consuming a couple of yogurts while awaiting their return, which occurred about 2 hours later. They re-entered the car and drove to another hotel, likely where the jerk was staying. Whether his wife was home or not remained a mystery, but at least he wasn't risking bringing her there. I endured an incredibly dull night in the rental car, passing time with several movies on my iPad. At 5:56 a.m., Tracy emerged from the hotel, visibly less refreshed than the night before, and climbed into the limousine. The jerk didn't accompany her. They returned to the initial hotel, where she entered alone, affording her time to freshen up before the meetings resumed at 9 a.m. I returned to my hotel and slept fitfully for a few hours. Witnessing her with him shattered my heart and fueled my anger. To realize she had been doing this to me for 24 years was crushing. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings, I trailed her to his hotel, passing time watching movies in my car until she emerged and returned to her own accommodations. By Friday, when the meetings concluded at noon, I was utterly exhausted and thoroughly annoyed. At 1:30, Tracy appeared in more relaxed attire as she entered the company limousine. Unlike previous days when only a handful of her colleagues were present, this time a sizable group lingered near the hotel entrance. Though a few heads turned, there seemed to be no overt disapproval of Tracy entering the limo alone with a suitcase. Perhaps they assumed it was purely business, or had grown accustomed to her routine. Throughout Friday and Saturday, I followed their movements to various locations, idling in my car, sipping coffee, and munching on yogurt. I experimented with some local fast food joints, but found the yogurt more satisfying. By then, my clothes were creased and fatigue had made me irritable. I felt somewhat akin to the famous TV detective Columbo, as if my affection for Tracy was slowly dwindling. On Saturday night, they boarded the limo and headed to a secluded upscale restaurant. Knowing Tracy's departure was imminent, I surmised it was their farewell dinner for the year. It was nearly time for me to return to work. I assumed that Marquist had a reservation, so when they arrived and were promptly seated, I waited in the car for about 30 minutes before heading into the restaurant. I guessed they would be in the middle of their main course by then. Earlier in the evening, I had checked into a nearby hotel, freshened up, and changed into a suit and tie I had brought for the occasion. Approaching the reservation desk, I showed them a photo of my wife and requested to be taken to her table. The maitre d' assessed me in my formal attire, with a large envelope in hand, and escorted me to Marquist's table. As we approached, both occupants glanced up. It took Tracy a moment to recognize me as her husband, before she broke into tears. Marquist looked puzzled and concerned. "Here you go, Tracy," I said, placing the envelope beside her plate. Swiftly, I took out my cell phone and snapped several photos of her Marquist and the envelope. With a tap, I sent those photos to my lawyer, my 3 children, Tracy's parents, and January. Nice trinkets, by the way. I assume you have 24 charms now. With that, I turned on my heel and left. I could hear a commotion in Norwegian being spoken behind me, but I paid it no mind. I also powered off my phone. I returned to my original hotel and experienced the most restful night's sleep I'd had in weeks. My flight back home from Oslo was scheduled for 7 a.m. local time, so I checked out of the hotel around 4, returned the rental car, and arrived at the airport by 5. 12 hours later, I was comfortably settled in my lazy boy in Dallas. Tracy's flight wasn't due for another 3 hours, and I suspected she wouldn't be home late. She'd likely head over to her parents for some solace. As I kicked back, I powered up my phone, only to find a barrage of notifications. Well, to be precise, it was Tracy who had stirred up the storm. I was merely the messenger. There were 23 voicemails and 16 texts waiting for me. 9 of the voicemails and 6 of the texts were from Tracy. I didn't bother listening to any of the messages or responding to the texts. I leisurely savored my Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey on the rocks before finally finishing it. Then, I dialed Alf's number. Among everyone I had sent the photos to, I felt the most remorseful about sending them to him. I owed him more than that, but I was fairly certain that if I hadn't sent him the photo, he wouldn't have believed me. "Dad, I'm sorry," were the first words out of my mouth as soon as he picked up. I know that was a harsh way to find out, but there really wasn't a good way to tell you. For about 10 seconds he remained silent, and I feared he was going to end the call until I heard a sniffle from the other end, indicating he was crying. "I understand, Brian," he finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "And it's me who owes you the apology. I thought I raised my daughter better than that. I know this may sound silly, but I hope we can still consider ourselves family, even after everything between you and my daughter plays out. You've been such a significant part of our lives." His crying was audible as he gently ended the call. Afterwards, I convened a conference call with my 3 children. While I always knew they were intelligent, I wasn't prepared for the initial question, which came from the youngest, Marilyn. "Are Jason and I not your children?" she asked between tears. "Darling, you all will always be my children until one of you decides otherwise. Who stayed up with you when you were sick? Who taught you math? Who coached your sports teams? Being a father is much more than just biological connection." During that phone call, tears flowed freely, but as soon as we hung up, it seemed the kids understood that I wasn't going anywhere and that our bond wouldn't falter. I briefed them on my plan to make Marquist pay and how I intended to divide the spoils 3 ways. Surprisingly, our discussion about Tracy and me was brief. The only takeaway was that the kids were as clueless about the affair as I was. It was a small comfort. Tracy didn't return home that night. My assumption that she'd seek refuge with her parents was confirmed when Alf called around 10 p.m. to arrange a Monday meeting. I'd already informed my boss of personal matters, and I doubted Tracy would be going to Johansson, so we scheduled the meeting for 2 p.m. at our home, at least for the time being. Tracy and her parents arrived separately, indicating Tracy's intention to stay the night. They arrived promptly at 2. I offered Alf and Barb drinks. Alf and I had Tennessee Honey, while Barb opted for Diet 7-Up. Tracy abstained. I didn't offer her a drink, just as I didn't offer a greeting kiss or hug. We all settled in the living room with Alf and I in chairs opposite the sofa where Tracy and Barb sat. There was a tense moment of silence as we each took a sip of our drinks and glanced at our glasses before Tracy cautiously began speaking. "Did you really need to go all the way to Oslo to deliver the papers to me? If you already knew, why not spare us both the trouble and serve me here?" she inquired. I was hoping for something more apologetic, but instead I found this approach disappointing. I needed to confirm for myself that what I had learned was true, that for 24 years the woman I thought was my soulmate had been giving herself a pass to be with someone else for 1 week every year. "There's no need for such language, dear," Barb interjected. "Yes, Mom, there is. And when you chose to join the delegation to come here, you exposed yourself to potentially uncomfortable situations. I love you and Dad as if you were my own parents, but even if they were here right now, I wouldn't hold back. The time for delicacy ended when your daughter cheated on me and returned home as if nothing had happened." "Did I ever give you a reason to betray my trust during all our years of marriage?" I asked, turning to Tracy. I noticed Alf frown and signaled to Barb with his index finger as I addressed Tracy. Hopefully there wouldn't be any more interruptions from her. I glared at my wife, who squirmed uncomfortably on the sofa. "No, Brian, you never gave me a reason to betray you like I did. I am so sorry." "Then why did you take so long? If you wanted the Marquis, why didn't you just tell me about it? Instead, you've been bullying me for 24 years. "Because I don't want Henrik. I want you, Brian. You are the one I want to spend my life with, the father of my children." "Stop it now, you," I exclaimed. "2 of them are not my biological children. How dare you? You're cheating on me and flaunting it by having 2 children with him." Tracy seemed stunned to realize that I knew that Jason and Marilyn were Henrik's children. It seems she didn't tell her parents about it either, as they both turned pale. I thought I heard Barb start crying, but I kept looking at Tracy. "So not only are you betraying me, but you're also showing me extreme disrespect by forcing me to raise another man's children. Just so you know, the kids already know, but I didn't inform them. They understood it from the photo, just like me. I just confirmed their suspicions." Tracy lowered her head, hiding the panic that I knew was written all over her face. "Oh no, oh no," she muttered. While she muttered to herself, I thought it was a good opportunity to get a refill. I raised my glass to Alf and made eye contact. He reciprocated and nodded, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. When I returned with the drinks, Tracy seemed calmer and immediately began speaking. "Listen, sweetie, we can move past this. Henrik was just a fling once a year, far away. I never took any love away from you for him, and if you hadn't found out, you'd still believe I'm your soulmate, which I am. Can't we go back to that?" "How stupid do you think I am?" I interrupted. "No. Some things can't be undone or unseen. Your terrible choices have ruined us. Alf, would you forgive Barb if she did to you what Tracy did to me?" "Honestly, Bri, no, I wouldn't." "So no, Tracy, that's not happening," I declared. "I may eventually stop loving you, but I don't know if I'll ever stop hating you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a bar to go to where I'm respected. Tracy, it'd be wise to gather your things and stay with your parents for a while, because you're not staying here while I am." "Sorry to be abrupt, Alf Barb. You know I care about you." That was the end of it. I didn't need to hear any more lies. I grabbed my keys and phone and headed to my place. Tracy resisted the divorce, so I leveraged one of my strategic advantages and initiated legal action against Johansson for neglecting to uphold their morals clause. This led to the unraveling of my marriage. 3 days later, Tracy tearfully agreed to sign the divorce papers. It turned out she had been terminated for cause, severely diminishing her prospects of securing another prestigious job like the one at Johansson. "I understand, Brian. You don't need to further ruin my life," she said. And then, as if on cue, karma stepped in to take care of that task for me. Following Tracy's termination, Johansson also had to dismiss Henrik, making headlines in the industry. It's uncommon for the son of a prominent CEO in the financial services sector to be let go by his father's company, especially for engaging in an affair with an employee. This turn of events didn't sit well with Mrs. Henrik Marquist, who apparently was not prepared for her social status to be tarnished by scandal. However, she seemed unaware of her husband's infidelity until the lawsuit was filed. When she learned of it, she reportedly became enraged, damaging numerous expensive items in their upscale home in Oslo before initiating divorce proceedings. Amidst the turmoil of being fired, facing a lawsuit, and undergoing a pending divorce, Marquist found himself a frequent subject of tabloid gossip in Europe. Apparently, news of his affairs reached a Johansson employee in London. It emerged that Marquist had been involved with her during corporate meetings with the London team for 1 week each year. Despite knowing he was married, she took issue with him having multiple lovers. Meanwhile, her husband sought child support reimbursement, though it seems they reached some agreement as he didn't file for divorce. Subsequently, 2 more women from Germany and Poland made allegations against Marquist. The media had a field day, and his wife was reportedly furious. In the end, Tracy was just one of 4 women he was involved with, resulting in 9 additional children aside from his 2 with his wife. One of the women tried to sue Johansson for harassment, claiming that the Marquis used his official position to coerce her. However, a Norwegian court dismissed the case, citing her having 2 children with him outside of marriage and repeatedly engaging in the affair, affirming Marquist's argument that it was consensual. As expected, the American media couldn't overlook the subjects of illicit affairs, divorce and children born outside of marriage to deceived husbands. Several newspapers and a couple of magazines sensationalized the story, thrusting us into the limelight temporarily. I found the covert stares I received in public places like restaurants or theaters rather uncomfortable, prompting me to become somewhat reclusive for about 3 months, seldom venturing beyond the grocery store. Initially, the children seemed to handle the situation relatively well, likely due to their upbringing in the digital age where privacy is scarce. However, after approximately 2 weeks, I received a distressing call from Marilyn one evening, tearfully expressing her struggle with the public knowing her mother's indiscretions. "It's not your burden to bear, Mar," I reassured her gently. "You're not accountable for her actions. You don't control her life." "Thanks, Daddy," she replied gratefully. "I know you're probably facing it too. I just needed someone to talk to." Although I empathized with her pain, it was comforting to realize that Marilyn sought solace and guidance from me, her father, during a difficult time. Regarding Tracy, Alf informed me during dinner one Sunday at my home that she rarely left his house, and when she did, it was typically at night while wearing a baseball cap. Most of her acquaintances seemingly distanced themselves from her, labeling her as the ignorant American woman on social media. After Tracy finalized the divorce, we essentially divided everything equally. Since Tracy was unemployed, I had to cover the remaining college expenses for Jason and Marilyn. However, after receiving a substantial payout from Henrik Marquist, I promptly handled those costs before distributing the rest of the money among the 3 kids. Additionally, I received a significant out-of-court settlement from Johansson to drop my lawsuit against the company. Since this settlement wasn't part of a lawsuit and was received after the divorce was finalized, I didn't have to share it with Tracy. Much of that money, along with my share of the profits from the sale of our house, went into building a small but beautiful home for myself in one of Dallas's trendier neighborhoods. I seriously considered relocating to one of Perriman's offices in another part of the country to escape the looks of pity and the whispering. However, after talking with Marilyn, I decided to follow my own advice and live my life without worrying about others' opinions regarding my ex-wife's actions. Yes, the pain is still there, and probably always will be, but it's time for me to move on. I just experienced one of life's greatest joys by walking my younger daughter down the aisle at her wedding. It's been 6 years since the divorce, and my bond with all my children remains as strong as it was before the revelation that my 2 youngest children aren't biologically mine. To their great credit, Jason and Marilyn have consistently supported me as their father. They're deceased after they found out that Henrik Marquist was their biological father. As far as I know, they haven't even tried to contact him, and he hasn't reached out to them either, which is perfectly fine by me. I couldn't be prouder of Marilyn, who likely struggled the most with her mother's infidelity and the birth of 2 children out of wedlock. I paid for her to see a psychologist a few times until she assured me she was doing fine. Jason seemed to take it all in stride, The nature versus nurture debate often comes up, and in his case, nurture has clearly prevailed. He may not resemble me physically, but in my eyes, he's almost my mini twin. All three kids eventually made some sort of peace with Tracy, which I suppose is good for their mental health. I try to keep my opinions about their mother's betrayal to myself because criticizing her won't make me look good to them. Besides, when I needed to vent, I always had January. Outside of the wedding, I have no reason to talk to Tracy, so I don't. The pain and anger are still there, though my love for her is gradually fading. I didn't start any conversations with her at the wedding, and only spoke to her when she initiated it, as it was impossible to ignore her. In the wedding photos, I stood next to her, trying to look happy, but if you look closely, there's a literal space between us in the pictures. Other than that one meeting when she first came back, Tracy never really tried to explain the affair to me or give me a sincere apology. I think she believed she would never get caught, so she probably never intended to tell me. It was pure chance that I found out, even if it was just a little extracurricular fun. As she claimed, it doesn't explain her having 2 kids with that jerk. About a year after the divorce, Alf told me over a bottle of Tennessee honey that I was right about Tracy having feelings for the jerk. After I told her to leave, she tried to talk to Marquist, but he wouldn't take her calls. Then she found out about his 3 other mistresses. Even he had to admit to her that she looked like nothing more than a stupid woman that a rich guy was using. Although I'm just 51, I can't see myself finding someone else to spend the rest of my life with. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust another woman as fully as I did with Tracy. So yes, there are moments when I wonder if I would have been better off staying blissfully ignorant. It may not be the ending I wanted for my story, but real life isn't always full of joy and sunshine. Sometimes it's about snippets of conversations overheard in airports during layovers.